Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. And like most people in the new year, Jamie and I have been talking about the new year and our goals and how we can make our podcast a little bit better and what we can do to improve on last year's new podcast. And so in our quest to be better in this new year, we thought we would just start by setting some goals. And one of the things we wanted to talk about was why the person that we're having on our podcast today is making a difference and breaking boundaries. And our guest today is Jamie Brown, and he is very dedicated to character education. And this morning, I called my 82-year-old father and wished him a happy birthday. And he said, Jerry, I think you had it right all along. You have been such a proponent of character education. Are they still doing that in schools? And I said, yes, Dad, they are. And in fact, our guest today is very dedicated to that. And he said, after I watched the events yesterday, I'm more convinced than ever this is something that we need to make sure that we are doing in our schools. And so as we talk about breaking boundaries, although it's not like huge innovation, it is in a way because we've been so dedicated to academics for so long. We've been so worried about the parts of speech and algebra. Right. And on days like today, I think we realize that character really is the plate. It's not one more thing on our plate as educators. Right. It really is what matters with kids.
Yeah, Jamie has a great view on this because it's not so much about the character education in isolation, but making sure that it's embedded throughout the day, embedded throughout the curriculum. And I think that that's most of the focus here. So Jamie has been a district peer leadership director, is a current vice principal, and he founded what is called Accept University. And this is committed to helping school communities embrace acceptance, tolerance, respect, empathy, inclusion, and citizenship on and offline. But what's so great about it also is that it's not just dedicated to doing this for students, but it's the whole education that is looked at here because it's looking also at training teachers as well. And I think that's so important here. Except you actually also earned a national promising practice from character.org, as well as global recognition by the Alliance for Excellent Education and Future Ready Schools. So, Jamie, tell us a little bit about Accept You. Tell us your goals, the purpose, and how this is helping.
Sure. First, let me just start by saying thank you so much for having me. Happy New Year. I'm really excited and, appreciative of the opportunity to be a guest on such an important podcast, in terms of the education world. And I guess, my goals, my aspirations, where all this is coming from is ironically in the world we're living in today, when you're talking about just the pandemic itself, social emotional learning and well-being, as well as character education, is now coming to the forefront of everybody's conversations. And, as you were saying, Jerry, it's not something new or innovative. It's always been there. And a lot of people have been doing it. They just don't know that they've been doing it, So I guess if there's a silver lining in today's times as an educator, that's a positive that now, we're kind of not forgetting about curriculum and academics, obviously, but when we have discussions about student achievement and being an instructional leader at whatever capacity you are in a building, now we're truly focused and honed in on really working towards developing the whole child And when it comes to Accept University and what I've tried to create and brand while being an educator in New Jersey public schools is taking that concept and redefining what whole child means. And for me, it's like you said, it's a whole community. So in order to develop the whole child, we have to develop the whole community first. So my philosophy is always been kind of working backwards. It's almost like a zipper that's broken and you're refixing it and going back and starting from scratch from the bottom up, but there's a cycle to it. So, not that it shouldn't start with the students, but in order to reach students, especially again in today's world and pandemic, if we're not looking out for the educators that have to look out for the students,
right.
and if we're not taking care of their well-being, how can we expect them to do the same for the students in the classroom? Right. And the same goes for the parents and the community itself. And that's pretty much where whole community's definition comes from in terms of my practice.
So Jamie, it sounds very purposeful. Is it a separate curriculum?
So I guess it would make sense to have the backstory of where it came from. I started out as an English teacher. I got hired about a month or so after 9/11. I had no intentions of really being an educator. My whole family are educators, and I loved being a black sheep of the family back in the day. I'm a musician along the Jersey Shore, so that was my passion. I wanted to work for Rolling Stone. I was fortunate enough somehow, some way to get an interview in August of 2001, about 3 weeks before, September 11 happened. And I was in a final interview session. Myself and a few other people were candidates 3 or 4 days prior. And then when September 11th happened, it changed my life completely. And I went to the only thing I knew other than music, which was education because of my family. And I was just an English teacher. But about 6 years in, someone introduced to me peer leadership, which we happened to have at my high school. I was in Old Bridge Township Public Schools in New Jersey. It's one of the largest high schools, most diverse high schools in the state. And they happened to have this program that was a senior leadership program. And I did it since 2006 while simultaneously teaching English. And in 2010, I got to take over the program and kind of rebrand it. And I had an amazing administration the whole time I was there, and the current administrators who gave me the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, and trusted me and really supported me and motivated me and inspired me to create something. We created an incredible senior leadership program within the high school itself, and little by little, year by year, we started to just question through the students' voices being empowered, why aren't we helping people outside of our building? And when you get a program to that level where the kids are teaching you just as much, if not more, than you're teaching them, I knew I had something. And, again, being such a large district, almost 20,000 kids, 12 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, a 9th grade building, and a high school. And being so diverse, there was opportunity to focus on what I didn't even know was considered character education or social emotional learning at all levels. So we started working with elementary school students on the typical anti-bullying programs and things of that nature, just to get our feet wet. And then the big concern was that, we were trying to create these peer leaders and focus on the kids when they got to us at the high school level. And I guess just one day I had that aha moment where I realized, why am I waiting until they enter the building? I need to be, connecting with them prior. So Accept University was born out of a middle school project that I created and collaborated with the SAC counselor, Bob Waite. I got to mention his name because he's, not only a mentor, but an incredible friend. And he's one of the best in the business, if not the best, about compassion and empathy. And we came up with this concept of let's just create a school of thought that's a program for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, because that was our 2 middle school grade levels. And we tried to divide up, what were the problem areas. We looked at the data, we crunched, what it was saying with the building administrators and the leadership teams within those 2 middle schools. And we focused on, we went and expanded, which was taboo 7 to 10 years ago, beyond just anti-bullying and, cyberbullying. There's more to it, and that's when we really started to hit and hone in on, what can we do to specifically create concepts that were not only meaningful, important for the kids at a certain grade level, but the key to where it gained a lot of traction and success was that instead of coming in and creating assemblies for the kids, I wanted it to be student driven. Right. And I really, if there's any proud moment for me in terms of birthing Accept University and this concept, it is a program, or a school culture revitalization program. But when I did it in Old Bridge and when I go to other schools and talk to them and help them about using pieces of it or the whole thing, it's the ability to have it live on past that 1 day's assembly or 3-day assembly. And that's where we really gained success and saw the culture shift in our own district in Old Bridge back when I was doing it, because my peer leaders were training 8th grade peer leaders that we created. And then they would turnkey and be the presenters of the presentation. So at 6th grade, we focused on transitioning from elementary to middle school. Right. And we talked about not only inside the building, bell to bell, how do I get to my locker, where's my bus, but we focused on the out of school stuff, finding who you are, being comfortable in your own skin. With the 7th graders, we talked about citizenship on and offline. And again, our 8th graders were having this conversation with what we created was 9th grade peer leaders. So when they're in the freshman building as 8th graders, they were able to continue. So we had like 8th grade peers, 9th grade peers, and ultimately the goal was to be the varsity peer leader as a senior. And they were all part of these. So when we did the citizenship one, that's where it started to gain, recognition outside of our own district, because we didn't just talk about cyberbullying and say, don't go on the computer, stay off of social media, it's bad. Like, that's not realistic. And I think that there was an authenticity in the message. And I think it was intentional to where the parents appreciated the spin. We didn't talk about cyberbullying. Instead, we talked about branding and how important it is for a kid, even at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, to learn how to socially brand themselves, meaning like, should I follow you and should you follow me? Who are you looking at on social media? It's okay to follow celebrities, but there's a major difference between someone who's, on TMZ every day for the wrong reasons versus Aaron Judge, who's working with, hashtag I can help and giving back to the community, so that one was a massive hit. And then in 8th grade, we created a social emotional learning, basically a full day retreat for the entire school for all of the 8th graders. So at both buildings, it was about 350 kids. And we took that, kicked it up a notch, and we said, well, how can we make this even better than the other two? We've got, peer-to-peer, student to student. So when I walk out of the room, the conversation continues. So then we brought in the counselors, we brought in teachers, we brought in the VPs, the principals, and I didn't know if they were going to be comfortable with it. And it became this phenomenon where, after we did it one year, the next year, instead of having 5 teachers, I had to pick 5 between 30 teachers because they all wanted to jump in and be a part of it. And again, it's ultimately, Accept University, it stands for just creating a safe place where every student feels valued, everybody in the building feels like their voice is heard, and they're safe. And being such a diverse place where I was at prior, it was important because that's what we ultimately found in the data was that, having everybody understand everybody's backgrounds and cultural differences and accept them, you had to do that before they entered high school. Because once you get into that building, it's too late, no matter what the problem is. And I think that's where, if I could talk to educators and they're listening to this podcast, that's my biggest piece of advice in this pandemic is, obviously curriculum's curriculum, you got to get through it, but compassionate curriculum is the phrase that I'm using with my staff today is that's got to be a part of it, whether it's the do now, whether it's an icebreaker, whether it's 30 seconds at the end of a period, whether it's just simply you standing outside of your classroom door and greeting them and saying hello. That real, personal, genuine, authentic, intentional relationship building, staff to student, student to student, and staff to staff. When you worry about, I don't have enough time to get through the curriculum anymore because of the pandemic, you'll actually have twice as much time than you did before if you take time to build those relationships.
Very
so I know it's a
true.
long-winded answer, but that's it in a nutshell.
Jamie, your own personal story is one of resilience. You started off not wanting to be a teacher. And then once you were put in that role, you not only became a teacher, but you found your place in teaching. And you not only took what you had, but you made it even better and found ways to make programs better and empower others. I'm going to ask you a very personal question now.
Okay. Uh-oh.
What character? Yes. And it's probably hard for you to answer because I know people like you don't always like to talk about yourself. But what character traits did you lean on to become a successful teacher, administrator that could empower others? Because I know that you had some resistance along the way, and there were some things that you came up against. Mm-hmm. So what were the character traits that you had to lean upon to have this resistance, first of all, to get into a career you hadn't really wanted to be in, and then to actually flourish in this career? What are the character traits?
Probably the first one is not even a character leadership trait, but just being naive, because I was 21, just turned 22 when I would have got hired.
Yes.
So 4 months out of college, I didn't know anything, right? But absolutely 100%. I think everything that has me sitting in this chair right now as we speak is based off of two things: humility and vulnerability. Probably the two hardest characteristics of any leader to embrace and put out there and model to make their team better. The humility of making the decision at 22 years old in an English classroom to say, or to know enough, I guess, with such a tough, at 22, I'm teaching 160, 18-year-old kids, I had all seniors, and the humility to let them into my world and teach them the curriculum off of my own personal beats in my own life, which leads to the vulnerability. Right. I didn't know. And again, this is, if you asked me this question 15 years ago, I wouldn't have this answer, but being older now and looking back, I think it was the only reason I survived. Okay. It's because I was doing what I love to do without knowing it, which was, again, character education and social emotional learning. It was telling personal stories, which is always, 50-50 with kids. Should you or shouldn't you do it? You ask 10 people, you'll get 5 and 5 say yes and no. Should you let kids in? And I've always been an open book as much as I could for my students, because, how can I ask them to be honest and real with me if I can't, if I'm not doing the same thing? And then for me, it's always like, I got to be able to look in the mirror and like what I see. And I always want to do what I tell my kids at the end of every class, which is you got to be able to put your head on the pillow at night. And that's all that matters. And that's kind of the credo of me as an educator. It's what Accept You stands for when we go in and talk to kids. And I, using that program to help a school's culture out, it's making everybody just look at their shoes and make sure that they feel real good. And that's it. But, some stories are tough, but I think when you do that, especially in a very diverse school, you open the door. And again, you think about the times that we're in today, to help kids embrace empathy, show compassion, not sympathy, because there's a major difference. And I don't want sympathy. I want compassion and empathy, because there's two sides of that coin that you want to make sure students learn the right one, and be okay with who they are. And if you develop that, again, you have a school's culture, that lifestyle in the building, be that, and the mood as far as the climate, feel that way when you walk into the building, whether you're a parent, a teacher, administrator, a student, the academics takes care of itself. And I found that out, and ultimately, the success of my previous high school and district, we went from, just the normal, typical public school, so to speak, across the board. You average on everything, excelled at some other things, to a state and national school of character and district of character. And to some people, they see it as a piece of paper. Some people don't know what it is. And for someone like me, that's more than a banner. Again, it's a brand, and it's a choice. It's a lifestyle choice. And that's how we always approach it with our schools. And that's what I'm trying to do with my current district. And we're well on our way.
Congratulations. That really is an honor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
It's a lot of work. And it's one of those,
Yes.
It's one of those you don't see on a report card, and trying to get not only the students to understand and the staff to understand what that really means and should mean and exemplify to the kids, but getting the community to see it too, as just as important, again, if not more in some cases, as the academia.
And I think what makes it work and the reason that it's so successful is because you spent the time at looking at root cause, right? It's not just about character education, which is important, but it's one component. As you mentioned before, it has to be a culture that is embedded throughout. And it's a whole child approach, but it's also a whole community approach. And that's what makes the difference. A lot of times we have really great initiatives that schools really dig into, but it ends up being just surface level because they're only looking at one component. And so what Accept University does is really look at all of these, looking at the root cause and taking all of these into consideration, and not just doing like a drive-by type of workshop. All right, guys, glad to meet you. We're gone. Good luck with this, right? Instead, it's a journey from kindergarten, not stopping at elementary, which often it does. Often schools do, right? But really making leaders out of these middle schoolers as well, and then transitioning to the varsity level, as you said, at the high school. I just love it.
I appreciate that. I do. And what you're saying is so true, because that's how it was birthed, because I was looking for, I don't want to say a me, but what we have now, what I've built now is, I was looking for someone who would come into my building and give an assembly at the, 10 years ago to my peer kids and motivate them. And I couldn't find it because, again, these subject areas are very taboo, and now they're finally not. And I hope that builds and, keeps going, that momentum. But back then I couldn't find that. And that's kind of why we did it. And then the other part of it, like you said, is like, I didn't want to be the even though I was in the district working, and I am in a district now working, I don't want to be the face of it. I just want to be the person behind it, but have the students drive it, because that's where the buy-in not only happens, but it continues. So the beauty of this program of Accept University, when I can cater it, it's built off of, the precedent of chronic absenteeism, tardiness, home life, ED stuff, all that kind of thing, taking the data, smashing it, putting it together, and then talking about it, but introducing it peer-to-peer, student to student. So that way, when we leave, even though my peer leaders leave after a day's work, the teachers can continue the conversation with the students, and then the peers in that building at that level that we've created and hand-selected and trained, they can come into the classrooms in their building and be seen as student leaders and be respected. It's a home run.
Yeah, it's nurtured and therefore embedded, and it's authentic, and that's what makes it real.
Yeah, and then the end piece is, like you said, the whole child is developing in that building, but then it expands itself on its own and becomes, like I said, my phrase is whole community. Because then when these kids go out into their local businesses, and this is, one of my projects right now with my peers is, appreciating the connection of, student to student, staff to staff, staff to student, staff to parent. Now, having the students and teachers and administrators and club advisors take that same approach and build the relationships with the locals in your town. So when you have a fundraiser, when you have a service learning project, you need to have it established to the point where I know personally, for me, I can pick up the phone and call any business in my town because I've taken the time with my students and my teams to build those personal relationships where even in the pandemic, I've got my sub shop, I got my pizza parlor, I got my coffee shop that I can call like we did in April to do Teachers Appreciation Week, and they're willing to do it because we've built an authentic relationship.
Yep.
And that's just as important, because when you get that community partnership, you'll survive what's going on today, hands down. You'll always be okay, and you'll get through it together. And that's what I call becoming, you'll be allies to adversity collectively, and you'll get through it. And you'll be able to teach your students, and you can, as an administrator right now, I can teach my staff how to embrace adversity. Right. Not that we want it and we wish it upon ourselves, but I got a model for them how they need to find the silver lining in what's going on right now, so they can spin that and take that back to the classroom again, and that full circle, do it to the kids, so then the kids can do it to their younger levels, and then we go out to the community and we do it together.
And the community appreciates that, because you are creating the next generation of workers. And when you talk to community, one of the things that they talk about is that responsibility piece. They say we can train them on the skills they need here, but we need those character traits is what we hear from businesses. So
sure. Yeah, because you have students today who could be straight A students, could be maybe average student, but I'm a great student athlete, whatever the case may be. And they can go on social media on their phones and talk all day and share and post and tweet and reshare and all that and comment. But the majority of students have not been taught or struggle or are nervous to go and talk to an adult face to face, to have a conversation with someone, to lead a meeting, to do those kinds of things. And I think those life skills, when they're learning those out in the community, and now you've got a local business teaching my peer leader those skills. Again, to me, it's just as important as the textbook that's in their book bag. And they're getting the best of both worlds, and they'll be able to go toe to toe with anybody in any career if they get that experience before they get out of school.
Absolutely. And I think you've hit on the secret sauce, and that is getting the kids involved. Once they are part of the teaching and the solution, it is so much stronger than when it's just the adults. Yeah. But that leads me to another question. Having been in education for over 30 years, I know that there's always those teachers that are reluctant and say to you, I don't have time for this. I need to teach my curriculum. Right. What do you say to them? How do you convince them, if you will, that this is important?
There's nothing you can say, because it's lip service, right? Like, if you don't believe it, you don't believe it. Like, you're not going to convince me to try a food that I don't want to try if I don't want to try it, right?
Sure.
It's actions, for that educator, that parent, even that student, that colleague, whatever the case may be. It's the adage of actions speak louder than words. You just got to show them. I'm like I said, I'm brand new to this district. It's an incredible district. These guys are amazing. The staff is incredible. They're obviously working their tails off, double overtime to make us be open, be successful, give the kids the experience in the room, virtually. Students, the same thing, but I'm new. I still got to prove myself. Sure. Nobody cares about my resume. No one cares not that they don't care, but like, show me, right? Yes. And you did that there. Well, then, now there's this expectation of, well, do it here, right? And I've got to show them those ways. So for me, it's never like, you need to embrace SEL. You need to be doing it in the classroom. And that's where I get frustrated when I hear that out in the Twitter world, when I hear that on podcasts or websites or TV shows or whatever the case may be, where like, you've got to put it into the curriculum. You got to do it. And like, here, go. But they've never been taught it.
Right.
They've never been modeled it. Right. So like, if I want my staff to do SEL in the classroom, I got to show them what SEL looks and feels like. So the way I answer that question is, and I have been doing in my new district, because I have to do, you have to prove yourself, is I'm showing them, but I'm doing it authentically and genuinely. And I can already tell little by little in my current district that my staff and my team are starting to trust me. Students are starting to trust me and see, all right, this guy's not just a gimmick with some positive quote on his door that says positive vibes only. This is really his lifestyle. And then the next phase to that is I get that one teacher who buys in, which I already, got a couple, and then they start doing the same thing. And you got them when you don't do it. Right. So one of my things is very simple. Since the first day of the new year, which is only Monday, I go around the room, first period of the day. We got an upstairs and a downstairs. So I got about 75 rooms, a couple of gyms, a couple of common areas, study halls. And I knock on everybody's window, just tap, give a wave. They all wave me in, like open the door, like, what do you want? I'm like, no, just wave it. I've been doing it for 4 days now. And teacher today came up to me, said, it's really nice that you just do that. I appreciate that. Starts my day. So now I know the first time I don't knock on her door, hey, where were you? And she's noticing that I'm not a part of her routine. Right. I'm giving her something, and you bring them in. But my goal is hopefully that teacher will now start waving to another teacher when she walks by a room instead of just getting our laser focus. Right. It's like so funny. Think about when you walk down a hallway or you're walking in the streets, you look down at the ugly sidewalk. That's disgusting. When you look up, you see the world. So it's just the little things. And I try to show them without telling them. It's like the show don't tell policy. That's my mantra is like, let me show these guys what SEL really looks like and how it can impact them and their classrooms without telling them. Just like a kid, right? Like I have a 6-year-old daughter. It's like I buy her mac and cheese, but I get her the organic kinds because it's made out of carrots. She's not going to eat them if I put them on a plate, but if I sneak it in there, she's got it. Right. So, ultimately, and especially again in today's pandemic, even if, teachers, administrators, parents, students, all the above are typically resistant to change, I think we're all learning that we have no other choice now. Yeah. To embrace change and accept it and learn to pivot, be flexible, and honestly, be risk takers. You have to be because the traditional educational landscape is done. Even when this pandemic is gone, I don't think we're ever going back to just, pen the book to Scantron to PowerPoint. Like those days are gone. And in a lot of respects, that's not a bad thing. Yeah. It's got to become contagious and infectious. It really does. And SEL is easy to do, but it's got to be intentional and it's got to be genuine too, though. Like I said, because there are people who try it and, you can tell when someone's not being real with it. They're just doing it because I got the shirt and tie on, I'm wearing the hat, so I got to do it. No, if it's real, even when the person's telling you I don't want it, they usually my rule of thumb is if the more they tell me they don't want SEL or they don't like SEL or they don't like character ed, that person usually wants it the most or needs it the most and will embrace it the most in the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. And it's about that, making those connections, being authentic. And when you do have the naysayers or those who are resistant, I think it goes back to that root cause, as you mentioned, to the school culture, right? So you kind of have to start there. And if you are going to help to make that change, it has to be about modeling and being genuine.
And I tell every school that is resistant, or if there's a teacher of a school that I speak at that's resistant, it's not their fault typically, because like you said, it is different. It's not something that we're told even in grad school to focus on. It's not a conversation. It will be now because now it's become, at the top of the list. But typically, when else have we ever said, I know you have 180 days to get through your AP curriculum or through your elective that's only 3 months, but I want you to take 5 minutes out of every day, and I want you to get to know every single one of your 30 students and know something personal about them. Yep. No way. Like it never happened. And but now it is.
My dad taught for 37 years. And whenever someone would ask him, what do you teach? He taught, architectural drawing. He taught video production, but that's not what he answered. He said, I teach students. And that's the difference. And it's a mindset, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not so much about just plowing through that curriculum.
Yep.
It's about, just like you mentioned, it's about those connections, those relationships, and it's going to make your life as a teacher so much better, also easier to get through the content too when you have those connections. More importantly, you are cultivating, you're nourishing or nurturing those students so that they can become and grow throughout their years, but eventually become those productive citizens that you want them to be.
Absolutely. And I've seen both ends of the spectrums in schools that I've collaborated with. You know, I'm fortunate enough to say that my former district and the one I'm in now, they're both amazing schools. So I never had to deal with that piece of it. But some schools I've walked in and it's just not there. And at the end of the day, like I said, it's a lifestyle. And if you take that lifestyle on, you create a place, an environment in and out of the building, before and after the bell, where everybody, students, teachers, and administrators, and your support staff, and your transportation, and your buildings and grounds, and your custodians, and your lunch crew, and everybody want to be at, as opposed to have to be at. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it really does also, I think the student voice that you spoke about earlier is also part of that really important component to make all of this full circle and work. Because sure, we have to have the teachers on board, but when you have, who are the best models in this would be the students to allow for that whole community approach.
Absolutely. And with that, you know, I would encourage, again, if schools are looking at this or wondering how to get started, it doesn't have to be what I call the celebrated students. And by that, I mean the decorated, I should say, you know, kids wearing the varsity jackets, National Honor Society, student council, peer leaders. Doesn't have to be those kids. It can be, you know, the undecorated, the student who's just goes to school, does his job, does her job, gets his or her grades and does their thing. And it's kind of like, you know, walking in and out of just like a responsibility. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like, I encourage any school leader, school district that's listening to this or hears this to look at everybody. And that's when you say student voice, it's got to be representative of your entire student body population, not just one. You know, we always have those 3 or 4 teachers. I know if I need something, I go to the same 3 or 4 and they'll say yes every time, or students. You got to stay away from that too, because you're not driving the train to build it into a, you know, 360 lifestyle for everybody. So that's important too with the student voice.
Yes, I would agree. Well, Jamie, I think that what you have told us today, you've given us some really good nuggets of things that we can learn from. And one of them that I like the best is to show and not tell, and to really walk the walk and not just talk the talk. Yeah. I also think that the pandemic has taught us to prioritize what's really important. And when we did ask people, parents, stakeholders, what is it that's really important? I think they told us that it was the social and emotional needs of students, and they weren't saying the academics. And so I thank you for purposely integrating this into your focus and really setting sail on something that other school districts can really take hold of and model after. And so I love that this is a program that you are willing to share with other districts and put out there for others to look at and to share. Speaking of that, we appreciate that. Can you tell us where people can find you, Jamie, if they would like to talk to you or have you in to help their staff get started?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I appreciate that. I'm a huge person on social.
Yes.
Like you said, I'll come to any school, anywhere, travel and do presentations, trainings, retreats with student leaders, which is my favorite. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, I could train, a program, a student council program, student leaders, ROTC kids, whatever the case may be. as well as
Like that.
help with at-risk students and develop and deliver PD, which I don't like to call professional development. I call it personal development training because I focus
like that
on
too.
the personal side. So if you're looking for team relationship building PD with your staff, but my website is acceptuniversity.com. You can see, where I've spoke at and things of that nature. And then on social, I'm on every platform. So Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram is VP, like vice principal, VP _ J Brown, VP _ JBROWN. On Facebook, it's Accept You is my Facebook page. I also have the VP _ J Brown Facebook page, but I have a Accept You Facebook page and Facebook group, which is free to join, and that's for educators all over the world. We have over 1,000 teachers, administrators, aspiring educational leaders, where we just share resources, ideas, questions that we have to help each other, kind of get through this time, especially. And then, like I said, LinkedIn is probably my bread and butter, and Twitter, if you use the hashtag Accept You, you can kind of see a lot of my work.
I found you on Twitter, so.
Great. Yeah, I love Twitter. I love being on Twitter chats. That would be my other advice to administrators and teachers. If you're looking for survival kits right now, just in general, go on Twitter, because every educator is there asking for help in every fashion. So, but yeah, anything anybody's looking for in any capacity, I would love to, have a conversation with them and help your school, revitalize, rebrand, rejuvenate, get jump started in terms of changing the lifestyle of your building and district.
Jamie, thank you so much. I mean, really, what a gift you give to others. And we hope to be able to share that, because really the ultimate goal is we feel it even more because of this world that we live in. We need to have those who are not sympathetic, as you said, but instead have empathy and compassion. And it's something that can't be taught in a one-time deal. It has to be a journey throughout their educational career so that they can take that and be those productive, empathetic citizens that we need, and workers in the workforce that we need them to be.
Be human, be kind. It's that simple.
It is. It really is. It really is.
Well, thank you guys so much again for having me. I really appreciate it. And, I'm humbled that you wanted to let me be a guest on here, and I appreciate the time and efforts. Thank you.
We appreciate you for walking the walk and not just talking the talk.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.